You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take, Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham. Thank you for joining us. YouTube, Spotify, Google, Apple, Anchor, you name it, we're there. Also, guys, in the description of whatever platform you're watching on, I always mark down the minute and the second, like the timing of each segment of the podcast. So I want you guys to get the most out of this podcast, so be sure and check the description out. If you want to skip ahead, if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, I will be deeply offended. Just kidding, I won't be offended at all. I want you guys to get the most out of it, so just know that you can always look down at the description of the podcast on any of the platforms and see the exact second at which I switch to a new topic, and you can have a listen there. So if you're seeing something that you like in the title or something that kind of drew you in, check the description out and make sure that you watch that segment. But we're here and we're excited. It is Thursday. Got a lot to talk about. The Jazz obviously lost in overtime to the Suns last night. We're going to break that down just a little bit and get into the Devin Booker versus Donovan Mitchell thing. Also going to talk about some NFL quarterbacks. There's a lot going on with the NFL draft and Deshaun Watson. And then, of course, I got to talk a little bit about Tiger Woods again because now, just after yesterday, it came out the reason for his crash. We'll get into that. So I'm going to start with the Jazz, though. I'm here in Utah, big Jazz fan. I'm a realist, though. I know that the Jazz have not ever won a title, and I know that, with fully healthy rosters, they would be third best at best in the NBA behind the Nets and the Lakers. Right now, neither of those rosters is fully healthy, and so I feel like the Jazz have a good shot at doing some damage. The Suns are right there nipping at their heels. The Suns are a team that is really overachieving. I've talked a lot about the Chris Paul effect. You can check that out in one of my previous podcasts, but Chris Paul is a guy who just everywhere he goes, they win. The Suns had been no good for years. They've had Devin Booker, they've had DeAndre Ayton, and they've just not been any good. And those are their best and second best players. Now I would say Chris Paul is their second best player, but their most important player. And then I would put DeAndre Ayton third. Devin Booker is their most talented player, their youngest, their rising star. But without Chris Paul, he and DeAndre Ayton proved to just not be very good. They couldn't win. Like, their numbers could be good, but the wins were not there. And so if your performance doesn't equate to wins, how valuable are you really? And Chris Paul comes in and boom, instantly they're contenders. I mean, they're second in the entire NBA, their record, their point differential, any metric you want to go by, they're right there among the very best in the league. Most people, myself included, are not giving them a huge chance to win the title. I think everyone's reserving that for the Nets and the Lakers, myself included. But even after that, in my tier, I would put the Suns on like a third tier below teams like the Jazz, the Clippers, the 76ers, maybe even the Bucks. We talked about that yesterday. But if you're a Jazz fan, there's nothing really to worry about here, okay? It was a road game for the Jazz against the second best team in the league, the second best record, second best point differential. That team is playing at home at full strength. They should win. They should win. And so for the Jazz to go to overtime and be right there, Donovan Mitchell said it himself, just a couple of rebounds away from getting the W. And the Suns, their offensive rebounding was out of this world. Like, the Jazz could not secure a rebound. It was so bizarre. But Jazz force overtime. Donnie hits a really clutch three at the end of regulation. Force overtime, and then the Suns kind of took over and end up winning the game. Donovan played pretty well. Devin Booker also played pretty well. And I talked yesterday about how there's kind of like this unwritten rivalry between the two. I don't think they dislike each other at all, but there's always this discussion about who's the better player, who deserves to be the All-Star. Well, in the All-Star voting, with the media and the coaches and the players and the fans, and actually the coaches did not vote, but the fans, the media, and the players, Donovan Mitchell scored quite a bit higher, and that's why he made the All-Star game, and Devin Booker didn't until he was a replacement, and then he, of course, got replaced himself. But Devin Booker's actually never made an All-Star game for real. He's been a replacement, and that's voted on by people that are in the game. Like, they're following the game very, very closely as media members and as players. And then the fans are obviously biased, but you think Donovan Mitchell's getting more biased Utah votes at one of the smallest markets in the NBA than Devin Booker would get in a far bigger market in Phoenix? I don't think so. So clearly the consensus is from that alone is that Donovan Mitchell is a better player. I continue to push that he is, but you get guys like LeBron James and some of these, other talk show guys that are saying that they think Devin Booker is. And I just don't see it. And again, before Chris Paul got there, what did Devin Booker accomplish? Nothing. Literally nothing. He did nothing until Chris Paul got there. And now he might he'll for sure make the playoffs. We'll see how they do when they get there. Donovan Mitchell, on the other hand, as the young number one guy on the Utah Jazz, has won playoff series. He's not just been to the playoffs every year. He's won the series. As the number one guy, the number one option, the leader of the team, he was beating Paul George and Russell Westbrook in the first round of the playoffs. So Donovan Mitchell is a proven winner already. He's still young and hasn't won a title by any means. Don't get me wrong there. But to get to a playoffs and to win a playoff series, that's a huge mountain to climb as a young NBA player. And Donovan Mitchell climbed it instantly. And he's continuing to improve. So I've got their numbers here. And it's wild how similar these guys are. Like it's absolutely insane how similar they are. So I'm going to put them up on the screen. I'll read them off for the people listening. But down the line, and I'll go quick here, but Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker are 0.3 points per game apart. Devin Booker has the slight edge, 26.1 to 25.8. Rebounds are near identical, 4.1 for Booker, 4.5 for Donovan Mitchell. Assists are close. Donovan Mitchell's ahead by nearly a full assist, 5.4 to 4.5. Blocks are near identical, 0.2 to 0.3. Donovan Mitchell gets the nod there. Steals near identical, 0.9 to 1. Donovan Mitchell gets the nod there. Field goal percentage is close, although Devin Booker's is pretty significantly better, almost 6% better, 49.5 to 43.6. Three-point percentage is close, but Donovan Mitchell is better by about 4% or 3.5%, 39.4 to 35.9. Free throw percentage near identical, 85.7 to 84. Turnovers close. Donovan gets the edge again, 2.8 to 3.3. PER close. Donovan gets the edge, 24.58 to 23.22. Defensive win shares are very close. Donovan's 48th in the league. Devin Booker 51st. Opponent field goal percentage differential. So again, that's the stat that tells you how well do they shoot. How well do their opponents shoot when defended by them versus when defended by everybody else? And both of them actually, their opponents shoot a little bit better when they're the primary defender. But Donovan's are significantly better at 3.7, Devin Booker at 0.2. So Booker gets the edge there. Their real plus minus, Donovan has a pretty significant edge there as well. 3.29, 30th in the NBA to 1.99 to Devin Booker, 59th in the NBA. And then their team records are obviously very close. Donovan gets the slight edge there. So down the line, they're like so freakishly close and similar. As you can see, if you're looking on YouTube, Donovan does have the edge in most of the categories. Almost all of them. Booker's got a slight edge in points. It's so minuscule. It's basically nothing. And then he does have an edge in field goal percentage and an ever so slight edge in free throw percentage. So then I looked at the clutch time stats. Clutch time stuff is last 5 minutes of the game or overtime with the score within 5 points or fewer. So 5 points or less remaining, 5 points or fewer in the score. And surprisingly, they're both worse in those moments. I was actually expecting to see something a little bit different than this, but they average, again, look how close they are. They average identical points in those scenarios, 2.9 to 2.9. They both shoot quite a bit worse in those scenarios, but Mitchell quite a bit better than Booker, 35.3 to 28.4. 3-point percentage, 20 for Booker, 25 for Donovan. So Donovan with the edge in both field goal percentage and 3-point percentage. Free throw percentage, Booker gets the edge, but they both drop down from their regular performance. 79.4 for Booker, 76.2 for Donnie. And then their plus minus is identical, 0.5. So these guys are like almost the exact same player, okay? Donovan does have a slight edge, though, really kind of across the board on both clutch time and regular stats. He's winning more categories convincingly, right? And most importantly, his has always led to wins. His performances have led to wins, and Booker's have not. And so I think Devin Booker is a phenomenal player. He's a rising star. They're almost identical in age as well. I didn't put Booker on my top 5 guys that I would build around. I had a Zion, Luka, and then I had Donovan Mitchell, Jokic. Well, it was the next. So ESPN came out with like their next, or the NBA did. I can't remember. No, it was ESPN, and they had anyone under 25. Mine was just guys for the next 10 seasons, and Booker would have been. He's like probably 7th or 8th on my list. I'd probably choose LaMelo Ball. In fact, I for sure would choose LaMelo Ball over Booker, but barely. And that's just because there's so much potential there that's untapped, and he's so young. But Booker's right there. I mean, to be like 7th or so. But yeah, I had Luka ahead. I don't regret that. I had Zion ahead. I don't regret that. I had Donovan Mitchell ahead. I don't regret that. I had Jokic ahead. I don't regret that. And Giannis, and I mean, how can you argue with Giannis, right? So those are the guys that I had ahead of a Devin Booker for guys I would want to build a team around for the next 10 years. And I think it's accurate, Suns got the better of the Jazz last night. Again, if you're a Jazz fan, don't fret, don't worry. This was a home game for a team that's supposed to be right there behind the Jazz, just a couple games behind, and they won in overtime. That's what they should do. You take this to a 7-game series, I think the Jazz win in 6. That's my honest opinion. So, all right, moving on from that. A lot of movement in, let's stick in the NBA, actually. I was going to move on to the NFL, but let's stick in the NBA real quick. Kevin Durant is back. He played last night. He came off the bench, played 19 minutes. Came off the bench. How weird is that? Kevin Durant came off the bench. Played 19 minutes. The Nets blew the Pelicans out by 28. And Durant was a perfect 5 for 5 from the field, including 2 of 2 from 3, a perfect 5 for 5 from the line, had 17 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists. He also, though, had 6 turnovers. That was the lone kind of blemish on his night, was 6 turnovers. 6 turnovers in 19 minutes. That's hard to do. That's a lot of turnovers in 19 minutes. But aside from that, he looked spectacular. The Nets looked spectacular. They were playing a pretty poor Pelicans team on the second game of a back-to-back on the road. So kind of an expected outcome, winning pretty big, but Durant looked fantastic. He looked healthy. He looked spry. He looked athletic. You got James Harden out for another 6 or 7 games or so. I guess they'll reevaluate him in like a week and a half. But my guess is he'll miss at least another 6 or 7 games. Maybe they get all of them back for the final stretch of 10 games, 15 games. They can get all of them back and then enter the playoffs, likely as the 1 seed in the East. They're the favorites. You got to have them as the favorites. I know I had them 4th in my power rankings last week, or just yesterday, I mean. That's because Durant wasn't back yet. Harden's out. They haven't been great without him. They're not nearly as good with just Kyrie. But I also said if healthy, they're the freaking favorites. We all know that. It's insane. And now like Blake Griffin's jumping out of the gym, dunking again. LaMarcus Aldridge has proven to be a huge pickup. He's getting buckets. They just look unbeatable. It's like this crazy, crazy, crazy super team. So if they stay healthy, I don't think there's anyone that's going to stop them. But it was exciting to see Kevin Durant back out on an NBA basketball court. Okay, now we will move to the NFL. A lot of quarterback stuff going on. Going to start with Deshaun Watson. There are now 22 accusers. 22 women have accused Deshaun Watson of sexual misconduct of varying degrees. Some of them more heinous and graphic than others, but all of them very similar in that they're masseuses. He's hitting them up on Instagram. That alone is just bizarre. Like that alone tells me that this is kind of more of a sexual thing for him. Because if you just want a massage, you're an NFL starting quarterback. You have access to fantastic masseuses through the team for free that are highly qualified, highly skilled, highly experienced and talented. And they're there at the team facilities. Like it's more convenient. It's going to be a better service. Everything about it just seems to be better, right? But he's choosing to forego that to DM girls on Instagram and go to their places or get them to come to his to do massages. To me, right off the bat, that screams of something more than just a massage, personally. Innocent until proven guilty, but I've said from the beginning, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's a raging fire here, and so the fire I've said is either with Deshaun Watson being a little bit of a scumbag, or it's with Tony Busby and these women looking for a money grab. Well, a huge, huge hole was just punched in the Tony Busby and the women trying to do a money grab argument, and that is that another woman came out separate from Tony Busby and that main group of women, and she publicly put her name and her face to it now and is not part of that group. She's not represented by Tony Busby. And now she is accusing him of the same types of things. And so you've now got 22 women, 21 of them in one camp, one in a different camp, but you've got two different camps now accusing of the exact same thing, 22 across the board accusing of the exact same thing. And one of the group of 21 has also put her name and face to it. So now you've got two names and faces that are publicly saying, this happened to me, here's my name, here's my face, this happened. So huge holes being punched in the argument that it's just a money grab. Again, innocent until proven guilty, but it's not looking good for Deshaun Watson. Here's a guy that was demanding a trade, wanted out of Houston, and he might just get it, and it might not be because he was traded. He might be suspended for a whole season. There's going to be some criminal charges here. There's now criminal investigations going on. The police are involved. The NFL is investigating it pretty heavily. And, there's talks of putting him on the commissioner's exempt list. I don't think the commissioner should do anything yet. I think he should just wait and see what the police do. The image is obviously really, really bad. The chances of there being misconduct here, in my opinion, are like 99.9% at this point. I'd be shocked if it's not true that he's been misbehaving on a high level with these masseuses. At the very least, it's extremely bizarre. But again, where there's smoke, there's fire. And to me, it looks like there's a raging fire in Deshaun Watson's vicinity. So something to keep an eye on and watch for. But it doesn't look like we're going to see Deshaun Watson play for at least a few games. I guess we'll see. But it's not looking good for him. I could see him missing the whole season. I could see it being a big legal battle that really affects his career big time and his life, obviously, moving forward. But yeah, really, really unfortunate. He's been dropped by Nike, dropped by Reliant Stadium, which they said they were already going to anyway, but dropped by Beats by Dre. So he's losing sponsorships, kind of similar like we saw with Tiger Woods, Lance Armstrong. Nike, though, stuck by Tiger Woods through his. They're not sticking by Deshaun Watson. And again, what did I talk about earlier this week? The value privilege is what I've dubbed it, right? If you bring a lot of value, there's a huge privilege that you get. You can just get away with so much more. And he's getting it already. If this was a second string quarterback, if this was some random guy on the team that wasn't a franchise quarterback, he would have been released already. Just from accusations alone, he would have been released. But because he's Deshaun Watson, because he's a top 4 quarterback in the world, the Texans are just kind of like, we're going to hang on to him and hope that this isn't true. But they're thinking, crap, this is true. This is bad. But Nike is like, look, you're pretty great, but you're not Tiger Woods, so we're out. We got a jet. So Nike drops him. Beats by Dre drops him. On the flip side now, speaking of Tiger Woods, he gets in another accident. They said they weren't going to release it. I said how that's just impossible. It's going to come out. And literally like a few hours after I posted that podcast, it came out that it was just speeding, right? He's going like 85 miles an hour, hits a tree at 75 miles an hour. And it didn't look like he even tried to hit the brake. They're saying he must have accidentally hit the gas. He doesn't remember anything. But no signs that he tried to stop. Very bizarre stuff out of Tiger Woods. I actually feel for the guy. Again, watching that documentary, this is a guy that just has the whole world at his fingertips, but I can imagine that it must be lonely sometimes in that position because you are viewed as almost like superhuman, supernatural. And so maybe it's harder to connect with people. I don't really know. He also had the bad example of his dad and one of his dad's close friends when he was a young boy, watching them openly cheat on their wives. And, obviously one of which was his mother. And so he just had a bad example set from the start, been in the public spotlight his entire life from a very young age. And he's just fallen. He's just fallen victim to addictions of sex and drugs and, painkillers. He's had multiple surgeries, and it's just a bummer because this is a guy that to me is the greatest golfer of all time. I said this yesterday. I don't even think it's very close. I think if you take his best 10 years and anyone else's best 10 years, and it's just an absolute destruction, Tiger Woods just annihilates everything. He's already tied for first for most career wins. He's alone in second place for career major championships, 3 behind Jack Nicklaus. But to me, he's the greatest of all time. He's the greatest of all time. I would like to see him come back. I think with his age alone, it's going to be really tough for him to pass Jack Nicklaus. To have to get 4 more majors to pass him at this age, it's going to be pretty tough. And I actually looked up Jack Nicklaus from his first major to his last, I think it was 23 years, which is pretty significant. And Tiger's already done that now from his first to now. He's at 23 years. So he'd have to set a real precedent of winning at an older age, and he'd have to do it multiple times, which is going to be really difficult. He did win the Masters 2 years ago, and how sad that, this whole documentary and his win at the Masters 2 years ago is supposed to be this great comeback story, this great comeback party, this celebration. And now, just before the Masters, 6 weeks before the Masters, he gets in another very bizarre car accident, similar to the one he got in when it all, came out that he was cheating on his wife with 14 women or whatever it was. And this one, they're just saying it was speeding, no ticket, no wrongdoing, no drugs, no alcohol. They don't know for sure. They just said he seemed like he wasn't impaired. He doesn't remember anything, but he did say that he hadn't been, but of course he's going to say he hadn't been drinking or, doing drugs. Not many people would say that they had been. And we've already got tape of him in the past saying that he hadn't been, but he thought he was in Orange County when he was in Florida. He was like asleep at the wheel. He was so duped up on different drugs. So he's already lied before, but not even going to get a ticket. I don't know how that's possible. You don't even get like a speeding ticket or something, but they're saying there's no eyewitnesses, no police no surveillance in the area. No one saw it. They just found a car, crashed into a tree, and their tests are saying he was going 75 when he hit that tree. Crazy that he's even alive. Lucky that he's alive. So that's the stuff on Tiger Woods. Okay, so back to the NFL quarterbacks, and again, that's some privilege, right? Like this guy just keeps falling, keeps messing up. Drug issues, infidelity issues, crazy drama surrounding Tiger Woods, but yet most of the sponsors, including the main one, Nike, stick with him. Deshaun Watson just has accusations is all right now. Nike's like, I'm out. That's value privilege. So back to the quarterbacks. NFL draft is coming up. We've talked a lot about, obviously Trevor Lawrence is going number 1 to the Jaguars. That's a done deal. Number 2 seems to be more and more a lock that it's going to be Zach Wilson, which is a bummer in my opinion because I just don't like the Jets. I don't see that as a good situation. They do have a new coach. They do have, some new culture that could be brewing there, but historically it's not been good. There's no one there to mentor him. He'll have to go be the starter from day one because they've gotten rid of Sam Darnold. And now the number 3 pick, the 49ers made this huge move to go up in the draft and get the number 3 pick. And Adam Schefter is saying it's going to be Mac Jones out of Alabama. Nobody else seems to be high on Mac Jones, at least not as high as the 49ers. So it's kind of bizarre if they would move up that high to get a guy they could just get later on anyway. But now Richard Sherman is saying that it's going to be Justin Fields. And so you've got Adam Schefter's very reliable reporter. He's saying it's Mac Jones, a 49er, an NFL star. Richard Sherman is saying it's going to be Justin Fields. So either way, it looks like we're for sure going to have a 1-2-3 sweep of quarterbacks in the draft with Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and then either Mac Jones or Justin Fields. I don't know which one is better. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a professional scout, but I am pretty good. I do have a pretty good feel for these things. I think that the safer bet, the better bet is I wouldn't say safer, actually. That's a bad word. Safe's not where you really want to go for with quarterback. You want to try and hit a home run because an average quarterback gives you an average team. You've got to go for broke. To me, the better choice is Justin Fields. And now here's the pros and cons of each. Justin Fields has given you 2 full years in college to look at a resume, see what he can do, be starting on a massive team at Ohio State in front of thousands of people, millions, including, when you include TV, be in that big public spotlight, big program, tough competition. He's given you 2 years of that, and he's been spectacular in both. Last year only had 8 games because of the pandemic, but made it to the national title game and then got blown out by Mac Jones in Alabama. So Mac Jones, on the other hand, has only given you 1 year, which was last year, the pandemic year, but they did have 13 games, and he was phenomenal. The guy threw for 4,500 yards. He had 41 touchdowns, only four interceptions, 13-0, wins the national title. It's one of the greatest single-season years you can think of, So that's the pro of him. Justin Fields is the more mobile guy by quite a bit. He's much more athletic, and that seems to be the way the NFL quarterback is going. You obviously still have a guy like Tom Brady who just won a Super Bowl with Super Bowl MVP, who's very not mobile. But it does feel like it's shifted over the last decade heavily to Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, even Aaron Rodgers, who's more of an old school drop back quarterback. Even he's quite a bit more mobile than like a Mac Jones is, or a Tom Brady certainly is, or the Tom Brady's, Peyton Manning's, Drew Brees's. Those are all-time greats, but it does feel like it's shifted a little bit in the direction of, hey, we want a guy that can run a little bit, as well, be mobile, be a dual threat. And, Zach Wilson has that. Trevor Lawrence has it a little bit. Justin Fields definitely has it. And Mac Jones definitely does not have it. So to me, you've got 2 years to go off of with Mac Jones. He was spectacular in both of them. And he's the more athletic, more mobile quarterback. To me, that's the better pick. That's what I would go with, especially if you traded up that far, San Francisco, to get him. You could have gotten Mac Jones later on anyway. So I hope that they didn't trade away all those picks to get a guy they could have gotten anyway down at 12 or whatever. That's pretty far reach. I guess they think they know something that other people don't, or it's a massive smokescreen to make sure that neither of those guys gets taken at number 2, because it's still kind of up in the air what the Jets are going to do, though it does look like it's going to be Zach Wilson. So something to keep our eye on there as well. Big games in the NBA tonight, guys, as I wrap up here. We've got the Jazz playing the Blazers. I'm excited about that. We've got last year's, I can't even say this with a straight face, the finals rematch of last year, the Lakers and the Heat. The plummeting Lakers without their 2 stars versus the totally average Miami Heat, who somehow last year met in the finals. They play tonight. And then there was one other game I wanted to touch on, if I can find it here. That was actually a pretty big deal, I thought. Bucks and Mavericks, that's a good one. Oh, it's Suns-Clippers. Yeah, the Suns and the Clippers. So the Clippers play at home tonight against the Suns. Suns, of course, on a back-to-back after playing the Jazz in overtime last night. You got to think the Clippers will win this one. But this will be a real test to see. This is another battle of 2 top teams in the Western Conference, 2 top teams in the NBA. Something to keep an eye on there. The Suns impressed me last night, but again, if you're a Jazz fan, don't fret. It was a road game against a team that's really good, and you went to overtime, and you barely lost by a few points. Not the end of the world. You're not going to sweep everybody in the playoffs anyway. We just got to hope for seeding purposes that we don't face the Lakers or the Clippers until the Western Conference Finals. We really want them to have to play each other before they play us. And the only way that can happen is if one of them gets into the 3 seed or they drop down into like the 6, 7 seed, right? Because otherwise, that you might be playing them in the first round if they drop all the way to the 8, or the second round, if they are 4 or 5. So you just want them to not be anywhere in there. That's what the Jazz need to hope for. That's all the time I have for today. I will see you guys mañana. I am out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out STBSportsTake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we are warriors.